should we just explore sexual orientation here? Because I think that's
definitely
a very key subject here. First of all, we have to appreciate that in the West, we only acknowledge two sexes. Yeah. We acknowledge male and female. Now, there is an Inuit system wherein they acknowledge, I think it's either 7 or 9 identifiably individual sexes. Yeah. Now, I suppose for the Inuit, spending an awful lot of time in your seal furs, where you can only see somebody's eyes, their nose and their top lip, the shape of the person perhaps doesn't define them in the same sort of way, and perhaps their characterological traits is what defines defines them in their kind of orientation. But essentially, they've got a range from masculine man and feminine woman to feminine man and masculine woman, and a range in between. And I would suggest that that's probably a fairly accurate description of nature.
Okay.
I would suggest that there is quite self-evidently biologically more girly girls and blokey girls as there are effeminate men and big strapping lads.
Right.
And that's just simply a matter of biology. Within that, we have the realm of social sexual attraction, wherein we are all expected at some point to attract a mate. And in some cultures, this is an incredibly important part of maturation and entering into the adult realm. Now, of course, this is fine if you're the pretty girly girl looking for the big strapping lad, because the big strapping lad is quite likely to find a girly girl quite appealing. But what happens if you're in a whole town full of big strapping lads and you're the girl that looks like a ball dyke? For
me, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, though.
Absolutely, but this is essentially, we're talking about natural biological attraction, and that cannot be ignored.
It can.
But we are naturally biologically attracted to certain types. I mean, I actually personally put it down to smell more than sight.
Yeah, okay. Testosterone and all the rest of it.
That's certainly how I perceive my own sexual attraction. The eyes have very little to do with it at all.
Okay.
So we have this position where it is entirely possible in any given society that any given group may not be able to find their ideal appropriate life partner, their ideal mate.
Okay.
And in those circumstances, we then tend to find certain marriages of convenience of a sort, or perhaps marriages of convenience or couplings of convenience. And I can actually quote a very prime example of this, of a couple who would generally have been considered by the outside world to have been a gay couple, two men living together as a couple, which was the case. But neither of these men were actually in the slightest bit interested in the homosexual sex act. And so, essentially, this couple lived as a couple for many, many years, only ever engaging in mutual masturbation.
Okay.
That, for them, was the sex act. And really, I would suggest that neither of those would appropriately be described as gay men. They were both very masculine. There wasn't a masculine dominant and a feminine subservient like you would normally get in any, hard to use the term normal here, but in any normal gay couple, according to all of the other gay couples that I've ever known. There's usually a predominant partner and a subservient partner, as there is in most other types of gay and straight coupling. So essentially, there are elements to sexual behaviour that are not cut and dried. It's not all gay and straight or bisexual or bi-curious. There's, as the book says, 50 shades of grey.
Okay.
And
but in the end, though, where does the procreation bit come in? Because isn't that an instinct within all of us?
Well, we touch on a very key biological point here. And in any investigation into human sexuality, it has to be borne in mind that the human female is one of very few mammalian females whose estrus is completely concealed to the male. Men have absolutely no idea when a woman is fertile. None whatsoever. And this is bonobo apes are about the only high-level mammal that we can point to where this is the same sort of instance. And the bonobos engage in some very, very interesting sexual behaviour. Bonobos will quite happily mock shag each other in greeting both men and women, males and females. It's the done thing. It's so
I know
you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
I know a few nightclubs like that.
And their behaviour has been largely touted by some of the sort of Stonewall sort of gay pride type frontline organisations as evidence of homosexuality amongst animals. Whereas I would actually suggest that in the bonobo ape community, that the partnering of males with males is almost unheard of. So even with this kind of sexual posturing of an indifferent nature, that the actual biological pairing of couples is still much the same as it is in human nature. But it's this this hiding of the estrus that basically leaves the whole is it a pride? No, it's not a pride of monkeys. Is it a troop of monkeys? The whole troop of bonobos in this kind of persistent state of sexual arousal, and that by way of diffusing that sexual arousal, the kind of minor sex act has become the diversion, I suppose, and has become a social familiar. And when you look back into quite a few of the human social structures, you see very similar sort of behaviours. The act of procreation is incredibly important to remain within the couple, even within fairly primitive cultures. But that doesn't necessarily mean that sexual activity is still only, entirely kept within the couple. There's been plenty of sort of orgiastic societies, the Dionysians and Arisian.
Well, it's all to do with like cultures are cultures, aren't they? I mean, yeah.
In fact, actually, this is probably something that I should put out there clearly. Is that from a very young age, even from as a teenager, I was never a consumer of pornography. Pornography, was something that we found abandoned in the country lanes, in the bushes. We never knew how it got there, but it was always there.
Yeah,
but I always found the images really distressing. That although obviously my teenage boyish fascination with the internal parts of a woman's body was obviously there was a simultaneous revulsion because of the kind of dead look behind the eyes of the women that were being photographed. And I don't know whether it was a consequence of being raised mostly by my mum and two sisters, that I had a slightly different kind of slant on the kind of objectifying of women than most boys of my age at that sort of time may have had. But I've never been
I think just like everything that is thrown at us, Jack, we need to be discerning. In my punk years in England, I actually met quite a few girls who were quite highly sexed and quite enjoyed being porn stars, if you don't mind me saying so. So when I asked that, I got to know these people across the board, and when I was talking to them, I said, well, are you being degraded? Or is this something that you don't? And the answer from these particular people were, absolutely not. There's an absolute rainbow, a spectrum of pornography, and there are people who choose.
I agree.
I'm only telling you what these people told me.
Absolutely, I agree in principle, but unfortunately, I would suggest that the causation of those individuals' indiscriminate sexuality would have been a consequence of some primary sexual trauma.
Maybe so. Maybe
and that
so,
this is also the case with, and this is also the case with every single gay man who has been frank and honest enough to answer my questions.
Okay.
Bar none. There's only one gay man that has been happy to answer my questions about their sexuality and how it came about. That wasn't a result of being abused as a child by a male adult relative.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I asked those specific questions. I really did. I mean, I was that quizzical.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like I say, there is. I was also going to go into sexual deviation and my concern about the addictive nature of pursuing some consensual sexual deviation, and again, because it can lead to scenarios like these girls thinking that pornography is something that they would want to do.
Right. Okay.
Because this is the thing. Really, anybody with a correctly aligned, positive sexual image of themselves, a positive libido, will not need anything beyond the ordinary sex act. The ordinary sex act will be repeatedly so mind-blowing that you wouldn't be able to conceive of anything that was better. So basically, we've got these elite pursuing all of their sexual deviances, and again, you know what I mean? Sadomasochism isn't something that the likes of you or I indulge in, because it just we don't have that power ego mentality that means that we have to subject ourselves to masochistic flights in order to relieve the ego burden that has on our libido.
No.
We don't need to have an orange stuffed in our mouth and shagged up the arse with a 12-inch dildo so we can go back and sit in the chambers and talk sense and make policy in the afternoon. But these people do, you know what I mean? And this is why that whole area of sexual deviancy being normalised and your kind of comfortableness with these reports back that you got from these various girls saying that they essentially enjoyed being part of the pornography scene. And like I say, I would suggest that they just simply don't understand how corrupted their own libidos are and what it was that was actually driving their willingness to
So
be
they don't
part.
understand what they've actually been through.
Not necessarily.
Right. Okay.
It could be, you know what I mean, mothers and fathers imparting distorted sexual identities on them.
I totally understand what you're saying, but I do think it's important for us to realise that, how can I put this, that consensual sexual acts need...
absolutely appropriate, and everybody is entitled to engage in whatever consensual act within the confines of their own sexual behaviour, and that with a consensual other, as long as that consent is adult consent and not some kind of fuzzy-wuzzy, well, she might have only been 8 years old, but she was enjoying it, so I carried on, sort of twisted pedo fucking consent.
Jack, I understand with all the shite we've seen and with all the my cousin was fantastically, outrageously sexually abused by a Catholic priest in Dundalk, okay? And I grew up going on holidays not thinking there was anything wrong and cannot believe that I didn't see this occurring, okay? Let alone their parents not seeing it, etc. So I suppose where I'm coming from is, oh, God. And it is such a difficult subject, but here's the thing. As a heterosexual male, I do not want... I mean, the biggest thrill is the fact that a female wants me. The biggest, amazing, mind-blowing thing is that, really? You want to do this? Right? And that's the most exciting and wonderful.
I don't think gratitude is necessarily the biggest aphrodisiac, Sean.
No, it's not the gratitude.
to be honest, mate.
It's the understanding that I am not forcing the situation. It's the understanding that there is no mentality that says I will overpower or whatever. Do you understand what I mean? So, and that, I think,
but again, there within the realms of consensual sexuality, there are plenty of couples that enjoy dominant and submissive sexual roles.
Well, that's
and that is highly arousing to them. And if that, again, is consensual and between adults, go for it.
Yes.
Fucking get your jollies, people, you know what I mean? Another thing as well is this kind of public perception that sex is something that has to be pursued 3-4 times a week. I mean, go do a bit of tantrics. I personally actually did 2 years as a full celibate as part of my kind of esoteric journey. But go do some tantric sex, people. You know what I mean? Make sex last a month and see what you get out of it at the end of the month.
Science is in a...
Trust me, you'd forgo the 4 times a night, 4 times a week nonsense. It's just
Jack, I gave celibacy a chance in my life. Okay, I was very highly sexual before, and then I decided maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is outrageous behavior, and I gave myself a good 4 years, and it totally fucked me up.
Really?
Really, I couldn't. When I came back into my own realization of who I am, what I am, and being a sexual being on this planet, I was far more comfortable than being celibate.
I mean, for me, certainly the abstinence was part of a rejecting of the pursuance of my masculinity to the rejection of all else, which, while I had insisted on always having a girlfriend or a partner, while I had pursued, masturbation in the absence of sex, that my dick was essentially the replacement for my brain. And many of my actions were basically dick-led. And I'm recognising just exactly how dick-led so many of my actions were. I decided that I'd actually rather decide what I did myself rather than just listening to what my dick said all the time. So I thought I'd better retire it for a few years.
Listen, as this is touching on Taboo's show, and I know that both of us are very talkative people, Jack, and we'd like to get a word in edgeways sometimes. The pair of us, we're outrageous, the two of us. Is I've had a private message, okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say who this private message is from. Okay,
of course.
But it's during the course of this conversation, and can I ask you a question about what you think about
Please feel free.
This subject? It's basically women squirting, and where does that fit in? Do you know anything about it? That so many women have never experienced it, and why do women experience it and other women don't experience it?
Okay, yes. I probably can just about go there. Okay. Essentially, there are a vast swathe of women out there in the general public who will have only ever have experienced a partial orgasm. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, ladies. I know you've been thinking it's fabulous, but it's probably only a partial orgasm. And when you experience a full orgasm, there is a completely different sequence of biology that kicks in. I actually call it baby. I actually call it baby making sex, because I can actually identify each of the sex acts that ended up in my 4 children. Actually, it's only 3 of them are mine, but I know the moment of conception of both sets of my children. Simply because it was one of those orgasms, and literally the female body will kick in and milk the male. We start to actually begin to be more like fish, or a reptilian sex act at this point. The whole thing becomes very much more mechanical and out of our control. And as such, we largely leave our bodies during this. It's a transcendental experience. And many people, it's the only way of experiencing transcendence. So that's why I say, sort of go check out your tantric sex.
But you don't necessarily have to. You don't necessarily have to be a squirter to get to the full maximum potential.
No, but it's part of that biologic. It's part of that biology.
Yes, okay.
So it's just simply an excess of lubrication due to the kind of the overarching biology is now to extract the semen and to shift it to an egg as soon as humanly possible because I'm in estrus.
Yeah.
I mean, there's another thing as well. I can almost predict within a matter of a day or so of my partner having a period, because I'll find it absolutely irresistibly arousing for sort of 2 or 3 days beforehand.
Absolutely same as I do. Yeah.
Well, there you go, and there we have. As humans, we have this huge olfactory nerve that's designed for processing smells on a molecular level, but it's not attached to our conscious mind. It goes straight into the prelimbic mind, the reptilian part of the brain. Yeah, so we have a whole raft of human behaviour that's driven by scent and possibly pheromones that we're completely ignorant of the actions of. And that drives much of this behaviour as well, much of the sort of sexual indiscretion that happens more amongst sort of young couples where, one or other partner will stray under, unordinary circumstances will quite often cause a younger partner to stray where perhaps they would be more monogamous otherwise. And that is simply part of this kind of pheromonal language that goes on between that's a whole other field of things. The activity of sperm. The activity of sperm in utero is another entire field of research because there's a battleground going on there. If you're a woman,
Marla in the chat. But look, we'll carry on with what you were saying. But Marla says, "Shit, my husband walked into the kitchen and asked what I was listening to, and right then Sean said, women squirting." So I hope
voice
sat down
is the
next
rudest
to you,
word in the human language. But so where was I? Yes. So essentially, we in
you were on
in the in utero environment. If a woman has been indiscreet with somebody other than their regular life partner and returns home within the sort of 6 to 8 hours that the sperm remains in uterus, that the partner's sperm convert to a biocidal form of sperm and basically go on the attack. Right. And they will seek out and try and kill all of the sperms that they find of this other man. And the man will be completely oblivious to the fact that his bollocks have recognised this potential threat to his feathered nest.
Do you know this to be true?
Yes, I've actually seen video footage of it happening. It's fascinating. The tails of the tails of the attacking sperm basically wrap themselves around the neck of the other sperm and then tighten into a garrote.
Wow. I mean, I heard when you were talking to Johnny Mead the other day on his show, a couple of times he went, wow. Well, I never thought I would bloody say wow to you, Jack. Sperm fighters, sperm battlers.
Yeah.
Wow.
And moreover, like I say, the male biology responding to this threat of this other male, even though they've got no direct knowledge of them.
Wow,
that 6 to 8 hours after the woman has had sex with the man, and this is still up for going on.